Suspension, Matt. It is Shocktober, I heard through the grapevine. Shocktober
Shocktober.
in the automotive business.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sunday.
Sunday.
So yeah, Shocktober. I mean, now's the time of year with the weather change. We start to have a lot of complaints about suspension noises in the shop, squeaks and noises and rattles and various things. And one of the many common things this time of year, well, part of it, there's national companies that tend to promote their product this time of year. And in the spring too. And I start to think about potholes and people that live in areas where the roads are really bad and how much abuse the steering and suspension components and systems take. And for the most part, our roads in the metropolitan area of Phoenix are darn good compared to a lot of places. Although, you know, there's some intersections you go through and it's like washboard, you know, and it upsets the car. It doesn't want to go right. Or maybe you feel your car, you know, pulling on the lanes on the freeway. It wants to wander more. These are all symptoms of parts being worn out in the front end, rubber bushings being broken. We can actually get significant suspension movement in the front end. So we're going to start seeing these kinds of problems come in. And of course, as we find that broken bushing, then we're going to notice the strut that's maybe leaking, which we're going to talk about the degrees of leaking on a strut or a mount or something like that that's related.
Well, I'm just picturing I'm a consumer and I'm in my local auto garage and I'm getting my oil changed and some guy comes out and says, "Hey, we're getting your oil changed, but we noticed there's a problem with your suspension." And I think suspension is not one of those problems where people go in saying I'm having a problem. Would you agree with that?
Yes, from a feeling standpoint. They come in for a noise, but they're not saying suspension. They just say, I have a noise. And oftentimes we find a suspension failure, but they don't come in because it feels sloppy or because and I think we use the analogy of it's like a pair of tennis shoes, your running shoes, your mattress, your lazy boy. You bought that car new or you bought it in whatever condition it was in, and that has denigrated over time. It's slowly gotten worse. And
Denigrated.
yes, and you don't feel it. You just don't, it's how do you boil a frog, right? Slow.
Very slow.
Yeah, so how do you just don't know. And this goes to another topic of drive your friend's car. Let's have drive your spouse car week. Trade cars. I mean, Dave, you can jump in somebody's car and you go drive it. And you're like, oh,
wow, how do these people live with this thing? Yeah, so it's one of those things where you maybe, let's just say you are in that scenario, Matt. You're in the auto shop and they're changing your oil and they call you up and they say, hey, we noticed your suspension components, your struts, shocks and struts. That's the buzzword you're going to hear. Your shocks and struts need to be replaced. And as a consumer, I'm like, I don't know, and it's expensive.
Yeah,
I mean, you could spend. I'm going to give you a big window because some people do it wrong and it's a lot less expensive, and some people do it right and it's a lot more expensive. But let's just say the window is $800 to $2,000.
Oh, easily $2,500. Yeah,
and you're going, well, I just was here for an oil change and $2,400. Why am I spending this money on suspension components, and specifically shocks and struts?
If I had no symptoms, no problems, no complaints, I would probably say thank you very much. Write down on the invoice what you noticed and why I need this. And if you truly do need it, like they weren't just surfing the car going, hey, we got $80 off this month for Shocktober. We're going to sell us some struts and shocks. Don't do that. And I think, and there's some stores that sell tires and big retailers. That's really their push. That's what they know how to do. So that's what they do. So in those cases, I would probably say, okay, I'm going to drive it for a week or two, because that service advisor or that technician ought to be able to describe to you what you're going to feel in the car. And I've done that with people who said, hey, they're bad. Well, how do you know they're bad? And I tell them, well, when you turn, you notice the car leans a lot more. Or when you step on the brakes, you'll notice the front end dives. Or when you go through that intersection that's washboard, the whole car kind of feels like it's hopping around a little bit. And then they come back and say, you know what? You're right. I did notice that after you told me about it. Let's go ahead and do those. But we've seen some that come in for a second opinion, and there's really no reason to replace them. Maybe they're just odometer surfing. Hey, you got 80,000 miles. You need new struts.
Well, let me give you the window then. So I know my mattress after 10 years is probably no good. I mean, that's probably pretty realistic. You could say mattress lasts for 10 years. Shocks and struts, I would say, this is not to say I haven't seen a strut that's bad with 45,000 miles on it. I mean, you could have one that just kind of had a birth defect, so to say, and that could be bad like that. But 80,000 miles to 120,000 miles, somewhere in there is where you might start to hear recommendations for struts or for shocks, and that's more normal. But sometimes just because it's got 80,000 miles on it isn't necessarily a reason to go buy struts.
No, I mean, you take a Honda, for example. For years, gosh, we hardly ever replaced the struts on a Honda. But you take a Malibu, and the things are blown out with 75,000 miles on them. So it does depend on the car a little bit, too. Not all are created equal. They are manufactured different. There's different vendors that manufacture these struts and shocks for various companies. Now, I have a Toyota pickup. It's got the TRD package, so it's got the Bilstein heavy duty. I've got 110,000 miles. I think those things are perfect still. They're of good quality to start with.
Well, also it depends on your driving habits.
Yeah.
Do you have that thing, weighted down all the time? Do you have a whole bunch of stuff in your trunk? I mean, is this vehicle being loaded, or is it just you driving around in it?
Right.
Yeah, that certainly plays into it. So that's kind of the window. Now, if I'm describing to you, Matt, there's springs in cars, and springs are what the weight of the vehicle rests on springs. So when you hit a bump, the spring is going to compress, and when you leave the bump, it's going to rebound. Okay, and so what struts do, or what shocks do, is they control the amount of rebound and
jounce and rebound, the down and the up.
The down and the up.
They're going to stabilize that.
Otherwise, you would hit a bump, and it would go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, and so that resists all that. And so when that goes away, you start to lose stability with the car. So some people will push struts. They go, "Oh, your car's not safe." That's where I get a little touchy when some people over dramatize because that maybe they're getting some sort of little spiff.
Yeah,
to
you're
sell
going to
this
die.
piece.
The kids are going to go through the windshield. You're going to burn.
Yeah.
You'll never see the rest of the family. Everybody else. The kids will be orphans. It's horrible. You got to get these done today.
Yeah. So I mean that's. I get a little sensitive when people get like that, but you should know, and it is something I think that you'll enjoy your car again. We don't realize because the mattress, we've been on it for 10 years. We don't realize that it's totally deteriorated, and then we get a new mattress and we're like, whoa, this is nice. I'm sleeping better all of a sudden. And for me, I enjoy driving my car. I got the car I like driving it, and so. People are amazed when they get new struts how much they're like, wow, this is great.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that go along with the new struts. I don't, like you said, people don't come in and say, I need some struts.
No.
There's usually a complaint. We have a noise. So you might come in because you have a going out the driveway, or you get this little squeak, especially with the cold onset of the cold weather. We're gonna hear some control arm bushings that are maybe bad. Just because they're making noise, by the way, doesn't mean that they're bad. However, if that's annoying to you, maybe you're a realtor and you want your car to be perfect. You want your clients out and this clunk clunk, this type of thing. So some people can tolerate the noise a little bit more than others. But we might have sway bar links. When you're turning, they make a noise. You might come in, you have this problem. You've got a blown out, bad control arm bushing, let's say. But you've also happened to just have some bad struts. So that's how that price of that repair can also really start to go up. That, it can get expensive. Dave, you said something about the window of the price of the struts earlier. What's the most overlooked thing? And I swear you have to ask this question if anybody ever gives you an estimate for struts.
Well, at the beginning I said, what's the low end to do the job wrong is $800. And I just happen to know that because I looked over somebody's quote from another shop, and the guy said, this is what they want. And it didn't have the strut mounts on there, and that's the big overlooked piece that you're talking about. It's like, if you're not going to do the strut mounts, and don't do the struts. I mean, and they'll leave that out of the bid because people want to be competitive. Some people are more sales driven. They want to sell everybody something, and they're on a heavy commission or something, and so they want to get the job. So they'll take the $800 job, but they don't want to tell you it's $1,200 because they want to get the job.
Or they tell you the $800 job, and they take it apart and say, "Whoa, man, Mrs. Jones, you're not going to believe this, but." We took those struts out, and holy gosh, we changed them over, and lo and behold, the strut mounts are bad. And you know what, though? Those strut mounts are more expensive than the darn strut
Oh yeah,
sometimes.
yeah they are.
They are.
Yeah they are. So if you're gonna do it, how much did if I know how to do it wrong versus how much to do it right, I want to know that.
We're going to have to carry this conversation a little bit more, but I also want to mention one other thing, Dave. You talk about, the strut, the car has 4 corners, so there's a strut or a shock in every single corner. Now you go put 4 struts on a car. That's a lot more than 2 struts on the front and 2 shocks on the back. So maybe the sales technique is they don't even mention the back. You just need some front struts.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really want to replace half the suspension?
No, it's like wearing one brand new shoe and one worn out shoe. To me, is just gonna, it's all connected. Now your hip's gonna hurt because your hip's out. You're compensating. Now your shoulder hurts. Next thing you know, your neck is sore. So
Yeah.
no, I'm not all for that. I mean, if you're gonna do it, hold out and maybe do it all at once.